have presentation of energy communities in Kozani and Western Macedonia. So Yanis will be joining us on at 11. So we will see, depending on our time schedule, maybe we will have some short discussion prior to his presentation, depending on how we go with the agenda. And after this presentation, an example of energy communities, we will have a short discussion closing session. Regarding logistics, just to inform you that this webinar will be recorded, and for discussion, please put your questions in the chat or just raise your hand during the discussion. So thank you. Arthur, please, I will stop sharing so you may continue. Just a moment.
Thanks a lot, Velko, and hello also from my side. Let me indeed share my screen. Okay, let me know if you can see.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, indeed, hello everyone. I'm quite excited to have the introductory presentation for today's webinar, Energy Communities for a Just Transition. The more attentive of you will have noticed the question mark in the header. And the reason for this is that there is a lot of attention to the potential of energy communities in general, in Europe, but also globally, and really the potential of energy communities to contribute to a democratization of the energy system, to contribute to a citizens-led, a community-driven energy transition, to lower energy prices, and essentially energy communities are supposed to solve a lot of the problems really that we have with regards to rolling out locally accepted renewable energy transition. So now specifically when looking at the transition regions and the context offered by just transition regions, this provides a relatively unique opportunity to reflect a little bit on the notion that energy communities can very effectively contribute to a just transition. The reason for this being is that we see that within the framework of the territorial just transition plans, energy communities, regions are inputting energy communities kind of as a cornerstone of their plans in terms of what they want to promote to increase the just uptake of a just energy transition. But it's not always equally made substantive. So in this webinar, we actually want to take a bit of a step back and ask a bit of a fundamental question: what really makes energy communities just, and what kind of discussion do we need in order to ensure that we really enable energy communities in a way that really contribute credibly to a just transition and avoid a situation where we're promoting energy communities just for the sake of, energy communities. So just to give a little bit of background about my person, my name is Arthur Hinsch. I'm a Climate Policy and Energy Governance Officer at ICLA European Secretariat in Freiburg, Germany. I have worked for a lot of years now on energy communities, just transitions and socially accepted renewable energy transition. We as ICLA Europe, we are one of the founding members of the Community Power Coalition, a coalition of organizations really calling for a citizens-led energy transition. And we have been working on the topic of energy communities and promoting specifically renewable energy communities within the framework of European law for quite some time, because we really believe in the concept. At the same time, we work a lot also on the just transitions and think it's important to have a bit of a nuanced conversation. What does it actually mean to introduce energy communities into a just transition, and essentially asking energy communities what makes them just? Yeah, so what am I going to talk about? My presentation is really a bit of an introductory presentation. So I'm going to refrain from talking about any specific energy communities examples here. We have enough examples here for you in the webinar, but I want to ask a couple of key questions in order to really set the scene for our discussion and hopefully a greater discussion around this topic in the future. So first, let's take a step back and ask what makes the transition just. Once you've kind of established that, we will ask what makes an energy community just. Yeah, if we have a just transition, what is an energy community and why specifically is it just? Keep in mind that, of course, we're assuming here a little bit that you are familiar to some extent with the concept of an energy community. But in a nutshell, an energy community refers to the collaboration between many different stakeholders, mostly citizens, SMEs, and local authorities, in the production, consumption, sharing, aggregation, distribution of renewable energy, or energy in general. So what makes energy communities just? And we have a couple of questions here. Is that because they rely on a certain sense of community, because they are really based in the social kind of heritage of just transition regions, and they can really connect to that? Does that make them just because they involve people? Are they just because they lower energy costs effectively and are primarily non-profit orientated? So there's this non-profit versus for-profit dimension that is often kind of being rather critically discussed. Is the fact that they're a non-profit, does that make them just? Are they just in the sense of a just transition regions endeavors? Are they just because they provide local economic benefit? Are they just because they do activities that are really valuable and deserving of public subsidies? And are they just because they contribute to creating jobs in just transition regions? Yeah, so we of course know that there is a lot of attention to shifts away from jobs in the coal plus and carbon intensive industry to ideally a more renewable sector, but also other industries. So to what it's often claimed that energy communities can contribute to this, but to what extent can they really do this? And does the fact that they apparently do create jobs, does that make them just? So with all these questions, in the end, we'll have a bit of a conclusion and outlook, setting the scene for the rest of the discussion. So what makes a transition just? There has been a lot of discussions around this, and of course, I'm assuming most of you who are attending this webinar kind of are familiar with the concept from the European Union, so I'll not go too much in depth here, but the different mechanisms that the European Union has at the moment, of course, to promote just transitions, also the different funding mechanisms and different governance principles. But let us kind of take a step back and consider the fundamental principle behind justness, yeah, and a just transition. And there's this beautiful quote by someone called Eloy Laurent, and it's a beautiful quote, and it says, "The people will not unite behind the science; they will unite behind justice." And when I first saw this quote, I think this is lovely because it summarizes in so many ways really the issue that we're seeing across so many parts of Europe, and specifically just transition regions, that people are not really sold by the fact that climate change is happening. Yeah? They're sold on measures because they perceive them as just and as being credible and as being justifiably kind of relevant to their own context, and they don't feel that they're excluded. So people will unite behind justice. Very important to consider. There's three fundamental elements of a just transition. There's recognition justice, actually, is a good one to start with. So it recognizes everybody's equal dignity. So the fact that looking at the energy system, that certain groups in society might be kind of disadvantaged by transition processes that need to be included, but also procedural justice, that it's important to include people into the just transition process in terms of decision-making processes, and also distributational justice, which speaks to the cost, responsibilities, and benefits being spread equally across society. Now, this is where energy communities, of course, come into play. In principle, they can cater to this very well, and in a certain sense, we really hope that they do. So that's kind of the fundamental principle. If you're interested, we at ICLA Europe have been developing with a couple of partners principles for sustainable and just cities. You can click on the slide on the link and it takes you there for more background information. But this is kind of the idea. People will not unite behind the science. They will unite behind justice. Extended to the energy system, they will unite behind a credible and affordable and a acceptable energy system. So what then makes an energy community just? Is it the fact that they have local ownership? So here you see the different ways how people can, how participation in renewable energy projects can materialize. Does that happen because people does justness happen because people participate within the framework of a cooperative and they invest with private capital and they get a certain benefit for the cooperative? Is that justness? Is it just if a renewable energy project is set up in a way that is not necessarily cooperative, but it might be a limited liability company where shares are actually not allocated and voting rights actually not allocated based on the one member one vote principle as it is in cooperatives, but they're actually allocated based on amounts of capital invested. So some people would say that is just, but people who are fans of cooperatives will say no, only one member one vote principles are just. So there's a couple of questions really. It's difficult to answer. It really depends on their perspective. What makes energy communities just? Is it the activities that they engage in? Is the fact that people get the opportunity to generate, aggregate, and store their own electricity or energy? Does that make it just because they're reclaiming the energy system? Is it because they get the opportunity to take ownership of the distribution grid within the framework of an energy community activity? But what happens? That could be. But what happens if we have many kind of islands or energy communities that are essentially having their own distribution grid, and then greater society still needs to kind of pay for the upkeep of the overarching grid? So somebody has to pay for running the public grid. So that's a question of justness. So you see also with regard to the activities, it depends who you ask and the context on, when energy communities can be perceived as just and by whom. Is it because they provide local economic benefit? Well, that's the fundamental principle. You have an energy community, meaning you have different stakeholders collectively investing and getting a certain remuneration on their investment, be it via shares or loans or other kind of forms of capital participation. And does that make them just? But we, of course, have to ask. And this is something that first I found when I talked to a local councillor in a municipality here in Germany, and they wanted to do a wind park. And then I asked them, okay, why don't you do an energy cooperative? And then a few weeks later, they told me, well, we actually decided against it because we didn't want those who already have enough money to even make more money. Yeah. So the question, because people, of course, cooperative profits primarily the members who are part of that cooperative. That's not a bad thing, but it's just a fact to be considered. So we always talk within the framework of European policymaking and everywhere about citizens-led energy transition. But within the framework of a just transition, it really helps to ask who is the citizen and citizens-led? And equally, who is the community and community-driven? These kind of things are barely discussed. It's very often assumed that just because something is citizens-led and it's community-driven, it's automatically good. Well, usually energy communities are done for the good, and people really do them because they want to contribute to a local energy transition, to acceptance. But depending on who you ask, and I've had conversations like this with councillors, municipalities, it really depends who is leading the energy community and with what purpose. And I'm going to take this a step further, and I'm really playing devil's advocate here because I really believe in energy communities and renewable energy communities in particular, but I really want to play devil's advocate for the purpose of having realistic discussion. So the little seagull here is asking, looking into the horizon, remembering this nice Bible quote of, "For to everyone that has shall be given, and he shall have abundance." What does that mean? It means that if you have a collectively owned renewable energy community, of course, it might contribute to local acceptance and more renewables. But it needs to be very clear that if it's a community-based initiative, there's a certain community which has the capital to invest. A large portion of people in Europe do not necessarily have the capital to invest into their own project, into such an energy community. This fact needs to be taken seriously, and we have seen many examples of this in Europe also, where I would really say that these energy communities are not really just in the sense that they contribute to a just energy transition in general, but they profit a certain group of people. So these kind of effects need to be avoided. But of course, we understand even if you have these kind of effects, it contributes to more local renewables and potentially to more acceptance. That's a principal idea. But again, very important to be aware of these nuances. Is it because they rely and foster a sense of community? It has often been shown that the moment you have a strong sense of community, this results in a higher a probability that people want to create some kind of energy community scheme. Yeah, especially in like carbon-intensive regions or just transition fund regions, there's often a strong kind of social identity around the production of energy. So can we capitalize on that? And would that be considered just? And you see here also, when you look at kind of the very nice overview that the Rural Energy Community Advisory Hub is giving on the website in terms of the definitions of these two energy communities within the framework of the EU law, you see that there's a lot of mention about the purpose. It's supposed to be a social purpose. It has to be owned by local people, and it needs to be governed, open, and voluntary. Does that make it just? It might very well might be. We see that in different energy communities around Europe, the moment they have some kind of marketing scheme in the sense, and they kind of try to mention and sell kind of the idea of an energy community, is that people can create their own electricity and appeal to the sense of shared identity within that region. That really helps in getting people to join an energy community. We've seen a couple of examples in different energy cooperatives specifically. So the question really is, what if the effective territories in just transition regions could continue maintaining their shared identity as an energy producer with the strong social fabric, while at the same time still pursuing a more sustainable and just transition? This is really the question, and something that we will be answering with the concrete examples later in today's webinar. Are they just because the lower energy costs and they're non-profit orientated? This is also a very good question. Ideally, and this I would argue the point, from my perspective at least, the point of an energy community is not primarily to make people money. The point should really be, if we're serious about this, is to, on a large scale, contribute to a reduction of the energy costs, particularly for those who already have a big problem with paying the energy bills in general, especially in recent times. That should be the focus. The moment we achieve that, we achieve a more just and inclusive energy transition. The moment it's only, or it's primarily about creating economic return for a certain group who already has money, I don't think that's just. I still think it's nice. It creates acceptance, but it's not just in that sense. There are, of course, many ways to lower an energy bill. Yeah, that's something very important to take into account. And then many buildings in Europe are very badly renovated, yeah, and it's perhaps going to those people's houses and giving them advice on how they can implement short-term energy poverty mitigation measures to save energy would be a good thing. Or actually just advising people to switch away from their base kind of standard electricity supplier to any other supplier, because any other suppliers are automatically going to be mostly cheaper than the one they're automatically allocated with or stuck with from the get-go. So energy communities are one possible option. And also the question of non-profit and versus for-profit is often being discussed. And with regard to justness, this also raises questions about the economic feasibility. So we see that a lot of non-profit energy communities are developing. They're often driven by volunteers, and that's a very good thing. It increases placed attachment. Ideally, also because they're non-profit, they have a lower energy cost primarily as their focus. But of course, also it's a question of business models. So in order to really upscale it, there might be, I'm not saying there necessarily has to, but there might be a room for a more for-profit approach potentially, or some kind of integration between these two concepts. So the question going forward in terms of justness is also going to be is like whether energy communities can reliably lower energy bills while still ensuring an acceptable return on the investment to investors. Because on one hand, you want to lower energy bills for the members and beneficiaries of the energy community, but also you need to raise the capital somehow to do that. And that can partially come from citizens themselves. But if you don't have any money to invest into an energy community, you're not going to join the energy community. That's why you need some kind of external capital. This can either come from donation schemes, or this can come from subsidy schemes or energy communities. So there's a few good examples of energy cooperatives that do that, where there is a surplus kind of tariff on members' electricity costs, and that surplus being used to lower electricity bills of energy poor households. So there's very beautiful things happening. But I am also aware of energy communities that are kind of more, where there's more kind of a for-profit company behind that actually promotes an energy sharing scheme. Yeah, so is that still compliant with EU law? Question mark. But nonetheless, this is kind of the discussion that's currently happening, and that needs to happen a lot more in terms of justness. And I'm coming to an end. So is it because they receive public subsidies, or is it because energy communities are this important in terms of creating a just energy transition that they really need to receive public subsidies and they can justifiably receive them? And this is a very good question. And the thing here that I would argue is that you see that a lot of energy communities that are developing to some extent receive some kind of subsidies, which is in principle not a bad thing. It does raise some questions in terms of the overall scalability of the business model sometimes, but that's a different discussion. But what I really think in terms of justness is important to consider is when you look at the available large-scale kind of subsidy schemes that sometimes happen now in several countries, what I'm hearing is that they're very difficult to access for energy communities, for often volunteer-run initiatives. So any kind of subsidy scheme that you will have also within the framework of a just transition region for energy communities that is very difficult to access for non-profit energy communities is not just at all for the ones that actually want to do it. That decreases actually the inclusivity of the concept. There's a few examples of regional energy community schemes that really help to provide startup capital for energy communities. Not going too much into detail here, but it's really to provide the startup capital, which needs to be paid back once the project is successful. These are low threshold funds. That is just also, in my opinion, having subsidy schemes that are easy to access without much hassle, because you can't expect people who do stuff on a voluntary basis often to having to deal with the complexities of the energy market. That's complete nonsense. Not going too much into this, but also saying the upcoming EU Energy Communities Facility actually is also going to work in this direction, of course. Yeah. Ideally, this needs to be, once it's up and running, it needs to be easy to access for energy communities in terms of the support. Otherwise, it kind of misses the point. And last but not least, are energy communities just because they create new jobs? And there's often being claimed, and to some extent that's also on the European Commission website, there's huge potential for energy communities to create new job creation. Does that make them just? Within the framework of a just transition region where there is a huge demand for new jobs because there are a lot of jobs are being lost. And here we just need to be aware how energy communities work. Because often, and not always, I mean, there's good examples of professionalized energy communities, but very often, if not mostly, it's going to be volunteers who are going to run it. In some European countries, and actually the European Economic Social Committee has shown that there is a lot of voluntary work actually happening in Europe, and that's actually increasing. So in some European countries, community volunteer work is going to increase local identification, local ownership. People want to do it. Whereas in other regions, and I would argue in a majority of just transition regions in Europe, the moment you start presenting energy communities as a concept that relies on volunteer work, it's going to be perceived as unpaid labor potentially. And we've had this direct feedback from people working within municipalities or citizens really that ask, okay, well, don't we have energy companies for that? So it's just something to take into account in terms of how you phrase energy communities within these kind of concepts. So we really actually recommend that in areas with high unemployment, it might actually be wiser to deploy energy communities in a relatively top-down manner, for instance, via municipalities, we will have some example later, rather than primarily expecting citizens to do this themselves. Depends again on the context and depends on the phrasing. So questions of justness, what is just? Yeah, is it allowing people to do volunteer work? Or is it just to actually provide them the opportunities and then they just need to contribute a little bit, if at all, and they're ultimately the beneficiaries of this? So, concluding, the socioeconomic environment of just transition fund territories presents a unique opportunity to encourage the promotion of energy communities in environments with different starting conditions. That's very important to take into account. And it's very important to consider differences in the cultural experiences, income levels, and volunteering readiness in order to facilitate a broad spectrum of energy communities. And this might sometimes even go beyond the framework offered by EU law with regard to what is an energy community, in order to make energy communities a proper, fundamental, and justified part of just transitions, in a way that is really inclusive and in a way that is conscious of these nuances when we talk about energy communities within the framework of just transitions. So I hope that was not too long in my introductory presentation. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion and Roberto, your presentation also now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Arthur. We should continue with the next presentation. So Roberto, please, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll just do this. Okay. Can you see the slides?
No. Arthur, do you have to stop sharing?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, now it should work. Probably.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, this is part of a research that I've been doing together with colleagues from a number of universities, among which the University of Sussex, where I've been based until last year. We're trying to study four regions, four coal-intensive regions in Europe, and try to understand what are the strategies that we call them the coping strategies. So the strategies that they implement in order to cope with transition. And when I use the pronoun they, I mean any sector of social or any sector of society. So starting from the governmental level, national governments to the local governments, etc. Down to the civil society or vice versa. I mean, so the four regions were one in Ida-Viruma in Estonia, North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany, Silesia in Poland, and Western Macedonia in Greece. We did our analysis by mainly looking at regional and national newspapers, governmental and institutional reports, policy documents, and academic articles, and as well as we interviewed a number of key informants from different sectors, mainly from the think tanks, from business in industry, and from NGOs and civil societies. We tried to interview some people from the political environment, but it was a bit harder. So we only managed to get one local politician from Silesia. The several parameters that we considered in our analysis are the following. So, don't see the slides apparently.
We can see them, yeah.
I can see them,
yeah.
Okay, someone else can, someone else can't. So
yeah, it seems that most people can't see the slides.
Most people can. Okay, then sorry about that. So yeah, so the strategies the parameters that we consider were essentially the actor that were, or the group doing the coping, the direct trigger for action, as for example, a certain policy that had been implemented, or some directive from European Union. Then whether the action attempted to resist, adapt, or transform, so resist energy transition, or adapt to it, or transform the existing environment into a different environment. For example, closing down a mine and opening and building a wind farm, that will be considered as a predominant transformative action.
The three classes of strategies we identified were resistance.
Don't know. Yeah, it seems. Sorry, it seems that there is something strange in this presentation. It's going alone. Let me reshare it. Sorry for that. Yep. Okay. So the resistance adaptation and I can't go back apparently. Yes. Okay. And then whether the action is symbolic or functional, so whether the actors are saying something or they're doing something, we make the difference, and also the impact or success of the action, including the time frame for the impact, contribution to global decarbonization, scale of impact, and the main actors targeted. Just a very brief mention of what these are.
Identified were resistance, adaptation, and transformation. We have some example of each here. I don't have so much time.
Yeah, there's something. Just a second, please. I think it's a pre-recording that I had on this, and it's going alone.
Because we can hear the sound as well, yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, okay, now it should be working now. Sorry about that. So again, let me reshare it. Okay, so the resistance strategy seeking to preserve current conditions and resist drivers of change, for example, underground mine strike would be a typical resistance strategy. Adaptation strategy, they would try to attempt to protect the functioning of the existing system from substantial change, but still doing some minor change. For example, a coal mine building solar panels on top of it to produce energy that will be used in the coal mine. And then transformation strategies, as I mentioned before, these were strategies aimed at changing radically the existing system, for example, by introducing a new solar farm or wind farm where there was none before, or in the place of an existing fossil fuel infrastructure. So I want to focus here on energy communities, of course, and energy communities are, we identified as energy communities as one of the possible coping strategies. Now, the point is that in all our database, which covered 2015 to the end of 2021, or the 4 regions, we only found one example of energy community mentioned explicitly in the newspapers, and I'm going to show in one of the last slides why this is one of the limits of this research, and why this result came about. But this is the sheet that we have within the coping strategy inventory that is published on the Sintran project webpage. So it's kind of a summary of what an energy community is, and the keywords it is related to, which are the main actors involved in energy communities, related strategies, and sample actions. And the sample action, as I mentioned, is an establishment of an energy community in Western Macedonia, in Greece, in close to the region, the city of Kozani, which I'm really looking forward to hear the representatives of Kozani later on talking about this.
And these emerging trends of this research are
then there are other strategies that we identified. This is about 30 of them, so you can see them here. I'm not going to put the presentation mode because I understand that there are some problem with sound, so you can see it from here.
Phase of transition significantly impacts coping strategies.
Yeah, perhaps Roberto, you can do it without the slides for now.
Yeah, I guess. Sorry about that. Sorry. So that we have a number of identified a number of strategies, which from sending letters to decision making, to repurposing former fossil fuel sites, to public consultations, to publication of energy transition studies, meetings with government ministries, investing in batteries and energy storage, litigation, protest and blockades, investing in hydrogen, and a number of other strategies that we identified. Now, I'm going to share this one because I'm pretty much sure that this one is not going to be problematic. And this is the establishment of an energy community in Kozani that I mentioned. So this starts in 2020 when the former mayor of Kozani, Lefterios Ioannidis, suggested citizens of the commune of Mavrodendri, which is in the Kozani province, to set up an initiative for production of energy community for production of energy from renewable energy sources. And the non-profit energy community was established in March 2021 with a goal to promote social and solidarity economy in the field of energy and energy sustainability, production, storage, and self-consumption. So this is the only example we found in our database. And this is quite unexpected, considering especially that according to some databases, there are over 3,500 energy communities in Europe. Or about 1,900 according to other sources, and which is an interesting point because there seems to be quite a huge discrepancy between different sources depending on what one considers as an energy community. This is a map of the EU's energy communities by the COMETS project. However, this map, you can see it here from on the left, but this map, when you click on it, is inaccessible. So it's probably it's probably being updated right now. And another project by the European Union, which is RISCOP, is trying to set up a number of peculiarities, a number of characterizations of energy communities, as for example, voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, economic participation through direct ownership, autonomy and independence, etc., and concern for communities. So we have these two programs, these two European programs that are studying energy communities, but the results seem to be, at least for the COMETs, still in the early stages. So again, we're looking forward to seeing how this map can be explored, this map of energy communities can be explored in the future, and more fine-grained details can be obtained from it. Now, just one slide about the limits. Why is it that we couldn't find any energy community mentioned in newspapers in North Rhine-Westphalia? I mean, in Silesia, Western Macedonia, and Ida Viruma, the answer is quite simple. I mean, there were not such initiatives at the time, but Germany and North Rhine-Westphalia is known for having quite many energy communities. So there's probably going to be, according to some sources, a saturation effect in the sense that there were already energy communities building up before the starting of our analysis period. So when another energy community came about in North Rhine-Westphalia, it was not considered worth as being published on newspapers, either the regional one or the national one. Possibly in local newspapers, we would have found notice of this, but not in the regional and national ones. Also, I remember that I remind you that our database stops in December 2021, and the kind of energy community climaxing is started more or less in that time, and it's getting more and more. So the number of energy communities is been increasing over the last year or two. That the database is regional, it's not national, so the absence we have identified relates only to the studied region, not to the whole country. And some community energy initiatives, and this is probably the most important point, some of these energy initiatives are not categorized as energy communities. And here I'm going to my last slide, which is about what is and what isn't an energy community, where depending on what you consider as a regulation. So if you stick to the regulation of the EU, then the EU has Directive 2018/2001 that sets the framework for renewable energy communities. It also, another directive, Internal Electricity Market Directive of 2019, introduces roles and responsibilities for citizen energy communities in the energy systems that covers all type of electricity. So these two are quite established definitions, but then some examples of energy communities do not respond to those definitions, and they're still considered by local or national standards as energy communities. And this is the case, for example, of Polish energy clusters, of the German company EWS, which was born in a kind of an energy community initiative, but then started to evolve into something bigger. So it's by European Union standards, it's not considered as an energy community, but originally it was one, and probably it kind of some of the aims it still complies with are those of an energy community. And with this, I would like to stop here, and please accept my apologies for the problems with the sound and all the other technicalities of this. Thanks.
Thank you, Roberto. We will continue with Agnieszka Spiridovic from Z Cluster. So Agnieszka, please, you may continue.
Okay. There is also an issue, I think, with the presentation. So can we change for another?
Okay. Oli. Olsinika, maybe. Olsinika, maybe we can continue with your presentation if it's fine.
It's okay. I will just change because I have some issues with WebEx today as well. So I will go into a phone. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to unshare my screen, but apparently.
Yeah, you should probably do it.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to.
Okay. So you should probably see my screen. Is it all right?
Yeah, we cannot see anything still.
And now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so it's perfect, right? So yeah, I think that maybe WebEx today has got some issues. All right, so yeah, if it's visible, I will start with the presentation. There were very important questions given at the beginning of today's speech. What is just transition? Who should fund it, and how to make it? So energy clusters are the kind of energy communities in Poland. We have actually two kinds of energy communities, but clusters are wider, and they can take into their members different kind of entities, with local authorities, with regional authorities, etc., etc. So the main thing for us is to break the monopoly of big distributors, big energy distributors and producers. That is probably the thing that appears in every European country now. As in Poland, there is a monopoly of 6 big energy distributors. They shared, they divided the countries into their into their jurisdiction, and it's really hard to get through to make energy just energy. For us means that energy is safe, so we have safe energy in our grids, at our homes, and second, that energy is affordable for everyone of the citizens. So we base mainly on one act that is in Polish energy law. Actually, Polish energy law was made for old big energy manufacturers, so big energy power plants based on coal. So in our opinion, for the usage for renewable just energy, it doesn't work, so it will not work. So we are working now on getting rid of this old kind of energy law and going to another ones. So what is our cluster, and why is it so special? Because we started at the very beginning when the energy clusters were allowed in Poland, and we made some kind of research project that we asked anyone who would like to join us. So we have any kinds of members. So we have energy producers. We have also our local distributor system operator, but it's a small private regional one. That is also a very important part, because we can distribute and connect also the renewables by our own. We have different kind of businesses, which are, for example, for electromobility, energy storage, etc., etc. We also ask universities to join, and very important part, of course, local and regional authorities. So to understand what the problem is in Poland, this is the slide. It's in Polish, sorry, but it's from one of the energy portals. On the right, this red part, it's actually the industry, so the usage of electric energy by the industry. On the left, this gray one, so 28% are services mainly. So it means that for industry and services, so for the companies in Poland, that is one of the biggest industrial countries in Europe, we have almost 70% of usage altogether of energy. So it means that for the blue one, so it means households, we have only 18% of the usage. So mainly we have to solve the problem with big energy consumers, and that is why our energy society was established. So what is our idea for that? It's making kind of lots of societies around the big industry consumer, because they will need the energy. We have new investments, like last month there was announced of huge investment in Lower Silesia, so in my region, of Intel, and their their need is to have 100% of green energy up to 2030. So what does it mean? It means that in Poland, it's almost impossible to give this kind of this amount of energy for the industrial consumer using the old methods of energy production, because it will not be needed. The need of green energy is very well visible. So what we do to create energy community like ours? So firstly, we take it into steps. It looks like an onion actually. So we check every part of area. What can we build? Where can we build? Where should exist new energy sources? We look abilities do we have, so the grids, we check the connections, etc. And what is also important, one of the most important things I think is it's the topic about education. So education and preparation for the communities. These are the things that are very important, just to show the people what and how they will benefit from appearance of renewables, because especially municipalities, they are they are used to thinking that if there is energy producer, like it was in the past, so huge energy plant or a coal mine, they will get taxes and they will have lots of employment for that, and they expect the same for renewables, which is wrong. So we have to change totally their way of thinking. So they need to change their thinking that distributed energy will bring totally another benefits. As we look at our region, after creating almost 100 megawatts of renewables, there is no industrial area for sale anymore. So we can see that after a couple of years of our work in this region, that is particularly small, and also have a famous Turów coal mine at the end of the region, we made investors to come here just to have green energy, because we have sources and we have distribution company that can give them direct line for the needs. So they are very well prepared. What we also were working on is the idea of energy valleys. It appeared in European Union funding. So there was a call for Horizon program. It's an energy valley call. So what we did, we looked at the grid. So here you can see the network, the backbone network of energy. We also checked where are the needs. So here you can see on the left there will be most of energy production because of the possibilities of area, of ground, of municipalities, etc. And the big investments are in the north and in the east, and a bit in the south. So we will be able to connect to the grid and distribute energy regionally to fulfill the needs of our investors. So it's a very important thing. We also would like to decarbonize the region that is on the bottom. That's the region of mountains and touristic region, where people use mostly coal or wood to heat their houses for everyday needs. So using this concept, there will be possibility just to decarbonize this important region. And also in this matter, we analyze the possibilities of energy storage, as it's very important. In Poland, we are having possibilities of hydrogen storing in the north. And in the south, we will be able to use also smaller hydrogen hubs to fulfill the needs of regions. So how we create these energy valleys is that we look at the map. We looked what can we have. We made networks of value chain, and we checked what should we do to generate renewables and to transfer them into hydrogen. So that's basically how we think that it should work. So it's like very small slides showing that everything should be connected. We should use every type of energy storage, every type of renewable energy production. So everything should be connected just to be resilient with the energy. And this is what we actually did in the north. These colorful places are our PVs and wind turbines. In the south, there are huge wind turbines that will be set on the leftovers of the Turów coal mine. And you can also see the grid that is by private distributor that allows to connect our sources. And that's the short boast how it looked like. The first start, how many people we were able to gather just to support our projects. You can see here ministers of the Polish government. There are also members of PGE, which is the company that owns the coal mine, also with the director of the Turów coal mine. So it doesn't mean that we have to close the mine like tomorrow. It means that we can exchange the old black energy into green energy, and we can do it step by step. But what have we do to convince firstly European Commission to support changes in the acts, in the legal acts, also in the European Union, in the whole area of European Union, and then push every government, because it's not the situation in Poland that the monopoly of old energy producers is blocking the changes, but it is possible. And I'd like just to make you feel that the more we do, the more will happen, and the more we can save the climate working together. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Agnieszka, for the interesting presentation. Now we will continue with Olsi. So we will continue with the example of real citizen-driven energy community in response to large industry interests. So Olsi, please, you may continue, with your example of energy community versus large dam projects.
It's working. Okay, good. Right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I haven't prepared any slide. I hope you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I haven't prepared any slides for my presentation, but I will try to bring here a little story, like you mentioned in the beginning. Actually, it's not a story on energy community by legal definition, because in Albania it's still the legal framework. It's not that appropriate to enable the energy communities to get established like in other countries in Europe. We have just recently, only in April this year, have amended the law on promotion of the renewable energy resources, which now sets a kind of a definition on the energy communities, but still it's not regulated how it is working elsewhere in Europe. However, the story is it's a kind of it came out from a kind of clash. We were, as NGO, as Eco Albania, together with our partners, are mainly working on nature conservation. So we've been campaigning for the preservation of the rivers in the Balkans, but especially in Albania, where our main focus has been the Vjosa River. Maybe some of you have heard about it. The Vjosa is considered to be the last free-flowing river in entire Europe. And for that, we have been campaigning since over the last decade, I would say, so since 2012. One of the major threats to the nature conservation of this unique ecosystem have been the construction of the hydropower. And we've been campaigning a lot against the development of these sort of projects, which are still considered as renewable energy, but they have a huge ecological footprint, and they cause irreversible huge impacts on the biodiversity, on the ecosystem functionality. So along the Vjosa, there have been planned several dam projects. We've been fighting basically all of them, but one of them was a real interesting and inspiring story because of the community involvement and engagement. So basically, the community of Kut village, which is a small village located in midsection of the Vjosa, they have been protesting and contesting the hydropower that basically would have mean the end of their community, because all their houses and their arable fields would have been drawn in the huge reservoir that would have been created by the dam. And they have been protesting a lot. And then we have they have been even the first community in Albania to initiate a lawsuit against the government. And finally, the court proved them right. So basically, we've been able to stop this large dam. And how the idea of the energy community, you can call it, came in was actually to give the government of Albania a strong message that this community, and actually all the communities along the Vjosa, and probably also along Albania, can also support their life, also finding other ways of producing their electricity. In Albania, the context is a bit different than what we heard from our last presentation in Poland, because our major consumers are still the households of the energy, because Albania it's not an industrialized country, which means that the energy can also be produced from other sources. And there is a handicap in Albania that almost 98% of our electricity is being produced by hydropower, which, as a matter of fact, sounds good because it's renewable, but they have, all these hydropower are really devastating the freshwater ecosystem, which are planet's lifelines, and they are really going to extinct because of the harmful project, and especially on the hydropower. So, and in terms also of the energy safety and energy security, Albania electricity system is not stable because it's much depending on the rainfall and on the precipitation. So all in all, although that it's almost 100% let's say renewable, Albania has to change or to make a big shift towards the energy mix within the renewables. And that was also a message that we've been trying to give. And in regard to Kut community, we brought out the idea of, let's give the government a message. So let's make the Kut as a community go solar. And that's why we initially conducted a feasibility study of how we can build this, how can we develop this idea. And there were, after the study, there have been actually coming out different scenarios. So the first scenario was to really start small, and that's what we choose actually, to go first of installation of the solar panels on the rooftop of the public buildings. So basically all the healthcare system building and municipal building, etc., and school and kindergarten, And there have been some 6 or 5 public buildings that we initiated to the installation of the PVs, and also the street lights all over the village. A village is a relatively big village because all in all there are, in comparison to Albanian villages, there are all in all roughly 1,800 inhabitants. And we calculated the amount of money needed, and then we started a fundraising campaign. Initially, we had the crowdfunding on the using all these GoFundMe and all these web based platforms, and we raised let's say half of the funds. Then our supporter company Patagonia came in with the idea, with the initiative of the idea, that they made all the donations double, meaning that everybody that would donate $1 US in the account or in the crowdfunding account, they were appearing too. And then we finally made this project possible with the support of Swiss Development Agency in Albania, and it was a kind of installation of roughly 80,000 euros. So it is already there. The PVs are producing electricity. They are, of course, sufficient in terms of energy production because the buildings are very low in consumptions of the energy, but still due to missing regulations of the electricity provider would have paid back to the community. Basically, this energy is being offered to the grid. So, however, the idea is to go beyond as it is now. So to make the overall community electricity, or let's say energy, sufficient, and with let's say reformation of the rules and regulations and laws in Albania, the Kut community can really act as a real energy community, and it can also get expanded, and it can also cover or be replicated in the other communities along the Vjosa, and basically also along Albania. Albania has a great potential in terms of solar energy, because there is an average of 250 up to 300 sunny days annually, which is a huge potential, and it's really unexplored, not only in terms of energy communities, but also in terms of large installations of companies. So yeah, basically this is what I wanted to share with you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Now we will continue with Yanis from Klube. We already heard something about Western Macedonia and energy communities there. So Yanis, please, you may continue with your presentation.
Thank you very much. I'll try to share. Let me know if it's working now.
It's fine. Yeah, maybe just put
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry for the delay, but there were meetings already scheduled, so I had to be in a meeting before, and I'll have to go for a meeting after. But in between, I'll try to give a very brief idea of what we do. First of all, where we are. Western Macedonia is northwestern part of the country. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the only non-sea or non-coastal region in Greece, which also involves a very different climate than the Greece you normally know. A lot of forests and lakes, even snow, maybe not the last 2 years. Climate change maybe is kicking off, but the rest is, as you know. And our big, let's say, the big feature of the region is the energy sector. It has been producing energy up to 3/4 of the total country's electricity for many decades, started around the 50s. Now it's declining, but still a lot of electricity coming from lignite, dirty fossil fuel, and a lot of working force, and a lot of the local ecosystem is related to that. On the top, the district heating is related to the residual heat from the power stations, nearby stations. So we have 3 of them in our region. One of them is supplying heat to the city of Kozani, the capital of Western Macedonia. Now, a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, actually, there was a brave decision to decarbonize the energy sector. At that point, it was decided that all power units, except one, would be decommissioned this year. Unfortunately, the war in Ukraine changed a bit the scenery. However, this is not going to be prolonged for much more time. So the general idea and what is actually happening is that in the place of the old mines, you can see here a picture of depleted coal mines where you have vast photovoltaic parks. And that is also related to Kozani's energy community, which is the topic of my intervention. And this is the first energy community, at least in Greece, to cover municipal energy needs through virtual net metering. And virtual net metering, for those that may not know, is that on one hand you have the production of electricity somewhere else, and then you have the consumption of the buildings. And then every 3 years, you have the total balance. And then if you manage to cover all that, you're fine. You don't owe anything more. So a few details about where we are, where we stand. A city of 70,000, so not too big, not too small. The plan is to develop this 7 megawatt photovoltaic park, aiming to cover approximately 11 gigawatt hours per year. And that will cover the consumption of only the municipal buildings. So this is very straightforward. All schools, all public lighting, pumping station, which is a very big part of the consumption, and some others I will show later. That will lead to avoiding a bit under 3,000 tons of CO2 per year. I already explained about the virtual net metering. And here are the members of the energy community in Kozani. So first of all, the municipality of Kozani, and then a lot of municipal companies, so which are different legal entities, but still owned for the majority by the municipality of Kozani. Water supply and the sewage municipal company that is also responsible for is running the district heating, a lot of sports clubs, the waste management company. It is actually the regional waste management company, but it is based in Kozani, so its consumption will be also virtual net metered, and some others like the industrial park, the big library, all the primary and secondary educational schools, and some other buildings. All these are the shareholders of the municipal energy community, which is a little bit a different model than what we usually hear about energy communities of the citizens, which, however, will benefit the citizens indirectly, because the plan is when it's operational, it will dramatically reduce the fees you have to pay, or what's the word? Anyway, the fees that you have to pay annually to the municipality for the various organizations that I mentioned. So the estimated cost rises to 6.3 million. A lot of discussions lately about where the funding will come. Most probably, I mean, the most obvious scenario at the moment seems to be heading to the European Investment Bank. This is it's a part of a bigger discussion of the region with EIB to involve some other players as well and get a loan at very good or better, let's say, interest rates, etc., planned to be installed on municipal land. Apparently, within the year, there will be some final process around it. However, if that doesn't work out, then because of a bigger plan for investment of photovoltaic plants in the area, there is always the plan B of agreeing with one of these private producers of electricity to purchase their electricity and provide the necessary electricity to exactly do the virtual net metering. The importance of it is that, as I mentioned, first, it will be a benefit for the citizens, an indirect benefit for the citizens, monetary, in terms of reducing their fees. Then it's the role that it plays for everybody to see and potentially copy. And also, it makes part of the climate neutral and smart city contract that Kozani has signed, or is about to sign, sorry, with the European Commission. It's in the framework of this mission, climate neutral and smart cities by 2030. So for those who are not aware, it's a big effort by the European Union to boost climate neutrality. And in that sense, it has chosen 100 plus 12, if I remember well, cities that will be or will try to be climate neutral by 2030. And being among them, Kozani really aims high. So this is going to work really as a very good example for itself, I mean, for the whole citizens, but also for other cities in the vicinity, in Greece, and elsewhere in the world. I don't know how I am with time. I had also prepared some slides about our cluster, but if time is limited, then I can just stop here, which is, I think it's fine, because then we can allow for some questions by the audience. It's up to you.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe we can start with the discussion. So if any of participants have questions, just raise your hand and ask our panelists. So that would be a good start. Let me just see. Yeah, if there are, maybe I can start with a question for Agnieszka. I was just wondering what kind of the areas were you using for development of the your renewable energy sources? Did you use like maybe all the brownfield sites or something? Did you do some kind of preliminary siting, or where you could be where you can build your wind farms or PV plants? Yeah. And other maybe immediately for Osli, is there any indication for the replication of your project which you did in Kuti in the other municipalities in Albania? So are there like any interest for other towns? Yeah.
So do you hear me?
The first one was for you, like what kind of areas were you using for the development?
I just asked, if you can hear me well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the thing was that we use mainly the grounds that are the worst class. So we call them from 4B to 6. So mainly there was very industrial farming of corn for biomass. That is actually not in our ethical opinion to use the ground so much and to fertilize it so much. So exchanging it for the blooming fields that are under our PVs was something that also was our goal. So now we have photovoltaic and blooming fields with lots of rare species of plants and animals coming back to the region. We also wanted to use brownfields, but in Poland, as in probably many of other countries that have coal mining, the thing is that they are owned by on a national level, so from state-owned agencies. That their business is not to use them for the purposes of implementation of energy production. So basically, they are changed into forests and given back to National Forestry Company. So it is very, very difficult now to convince them to change the way of thinking and use the brownfields for PVs and wind turbines. The project you saw with wind turbines
on the leftovers from the coal mine is a very, very difficult project, but it was possible only because there was like a gap in the law that enabled to the municipality to take over the land and then to use it for wind turbines. So that was like probably the unique situation that will not occur very, very quickly. There is another energy community in the north of Poland, in Wielkopolska, but there is a private owner of coal electricity plant and coal mine that is being in the closure in 2030. They will use their post-mining areas for energy production and hydrogen production as is possible as its private area.
Thank you. So also maybe you can continue if there is any examples of interest from other. Yeah. I think you are muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry. Well, actually, we have been promoting the project a lot, and it has been also very much accepted by the municipality, which practically governs the area where the project is installed. And we have already gained, let's say, the interest from other surrounded municipalities like the Pelena municipality. And actually, this is our next objective, you know, to also replicate the same, let's say, the same project in other municipalities. You know, of course, that's not our main pillar of work, because I said we are mainly working on nature conservation aspects, you know, but we kind of, you know, like the idea to give also a good example how nature could be preserved by bringing in other alternatives. And the energy is one of the aspects that we are working.
Thank you. Arthur, you raise your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Verko. Just to kind of jump into the discussion here. So I think what is important to reiterate, I think here was that the point of the conversation that we're having here now and the respective cases that we have is that we wanted to show kind of differences in terms of what kind of energy communities are forming and also in what kind of contexts and who ultimately are the benefits from them, right? So we had a very nice example from also, thanks a lot for that, for a purely citizens-driven initiative in Western Macedonia. It's the municipality driving it, but for the benefit of the citizen indirectly. And in Poland, it's a more regional kind of endeavor. Where there is jobs created and there is decarbonization happening and there's local social and economic value. But it's clear that these models, you know, they are fairly different, and they are also different in terms of how they fit within the general kind of scope of European law on renewable energy communities. So that's something to I think point out. And I think in the end, yeah, it's important to acknowledge that there often is a discussion in terms of, you know, why are energy communities being promoted? Why are certain forms of energy communities being promoted, right? And I think ultimately that's my point of view, is that it's because we want to have a cheaper electricity or energy price, ultimately, first and foremost. Yeah. And then the question is really just how much do you expect citizens to actually do themselves? And I think in the end, there's going to be a good mixture of different kinds of energy communities that will be forming. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And actually, I just have a quick question then to follow up on Yannis' presentation in your case, because you have a energy community, municipality driven. It's a bit different municipal services. So I think it complies with European law on renewable energy community. It's just that there's no citizen member directly, but it's still local authorities kind of doing an energy community together. Regarding the benefits for citizens, because that's ultimately the aim, how do you communicate that? How do you foresee communicating that to the citizens of Kozani? Like, do you have any process in place there in terms of how you explain the concept of an energy community? That it's in this case not particularly necessary for them to become a member of, say, a cooperative or some other legal entities. So, what's your approach there?
Okay, so first of all, it's not me, the municipality, but
yeah, fair enough. Yes,
yeah. I am in a cluster, but we work closely with the municipality, and then the municipality, I think, plans to integrate it within the discussion of climate neutrality, plus the upcoming elections. And I think that's where you also find very interesting ideas for mayors and potential mayors. When you can announce or promise at least that costs will be down if this project goes ahead, then you attract the interest. And I have a very, very good example of what we did together again with the municipality in another project, which was about collecting organic waste separately in the open markets. And there, the mayor promised and did to lower the fees that the producers, the farmers, had to pay if they would collect a certain amount of organic waste in the brown bins. And that worked well. So I think that now citizens also have a very practical idea of how this can roll out.
Thanks.
Roberto, please. You are muted.
Just wanted to add a number of elements to the view that the most important, say, aim of an energy community would be just reducing the amount of money that one's paying for electricity. I think there's other, especially social aspects to be considered. One of them is the idea to be able to manage the distribution and production of electricity on a smaller scale, which is kind of to be empowered in a certain sense on the distribution of electricity and the production of electricity. So, I mean, for example, I know people that are involved in energy communities, and they have no idea when they enter an energy community whether they will pay a bit less, the same as before. But they do it because they are moved by other kind of arguments. One of them is, kind of shared management of a small system, for example. Another energy community I know is reserving one part of the membership for families in need, so that those other people those other members that have that are part of the energy community, they are willing to pay a higher price of electricity if and when a certain number of needy families are included in the project. So it kind of also has a kind of a balancing and a kind of burden sharing element, I think, to it.
Thank you for a comment. Arthur, there is one question for you in the chat. I don't know if you have seen it or yeah.
I have, thanks. Actually, I think it relates quite well to what Roberta just said, actually, with regards to the kind of burden sharing and the how do you finance these kind of just energy communities where it's really, making it so that energy poor households are really able to benefit from energy community schemes. Matteo, thanks for your question. I think it really depends a little bit on which specific core I suppose you're referring to. Just from my experience, having worked on different Horizon cores or projects on energy communities and knowing kind of what's out there, I mean, there's quite a number of energy communities that are being developed as pilot programs within the framework of different Horizon projects, and that's a great thing. And it's also nice to see that very often the larger of those endeavors have as a primary aim the lowering of electricity bills of people who are experiencing periods of energy poverty. So that's great. I know with the examples from Spain and I think Portugal and others. And of course, there's also examples like this, as Roberta just mentioned, outside of the framework of Horizon pilot projects. But something I tend to notice, and I'm not the only one that kind of thinks about these things sometimes, is that these kind of schemes where essentially solar panels are being installed on collective housing or on buildings for the benefit of energy poor households within the framework of an Horizon project. Sometimes, the ultimate aim there is to lower the electricity bill and to have guarantee a low electricity bill over a period of time. But of course, you have to ask the question, who pays the solar panels for the initial investment? And in some cases that I know, it's not actually crowdfunded, although these cases exist. In some cases that are part of Horizon projects, it's actually funding that comes more or less via the Horizon project. So that is great because it decreases the need for people to invest themselves, but of course it asks questions about the replicability of these kind of schemes. So if essentially if an energy community is too reliant on European funding, I always wonder what's the business model in terms of replicating it to other contexts. So that's a bit of the hidden danger, I suppose, in terms of creating just energy communities. But generally, yeah, I mean, the idea is to do that. Yeah. Indeed, Antonia, that's very much true what you're pointing out there. Indeed, ResCube is a federation, not an EU project. Yeah, I don't know. Veiko, let's hand to Agnieszka, perhaps.
Yeah. Agnieszka, please. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I could, I should maybe say something about this case that, for solar panels and wind turbines, now it's profitable for the investors just to invest in them. So what basically is our aim in Hydrogen Valley is to prepare models, to prepare, feasibility studies, to prepare areas for the investors to come. Because why should we, as a citizen, invest in energy? Like a couple of years ago, we were thinking that, okay, the energy comes from the socket, from the wall. So why should we change it so much? So why should every citizen, learn so much about energy that is actually not really important for them? The importance for the citizen is to have cheap energy and to have green energy and to have it, right? So being secure. So the investors are able to come and to build our energy again. And it's like the thing that I'm pointing out in Poland very, very often, because in Poland now the direction is, okay, we will turn off the black energy power plants that are not very well seen in the European Commission and in the world, etc., etc., and we will solve the problem with the similar thing, so which they mean the nuclear power plants. So I keep asking a question: why all of us, why every citizen have to pay from their own, from their own money for the big nuclear power plant or even SMRs in Poland, if they're investors ready to make it for us instead of us? So that's the thing that that is questionable. And also, the citizens, they're aware that they have to invest their money in their own sources. So they build PVs on roofs, small wind turbines, they buy energy storages. So the thing is, who should pay for it? If us, for another big pseudo solution, or we can use the money that is on the market. For the hydrogen, it's not profitable yet. We are waiting for the hydrogen bank to appear with the auctions, and then I'm convinced that I will find investors when they have feasibility studies, they will invest in it. So the problem for example, for Poland, that is probably similar to Greece or the countries that are now not like Germany or the Netherlands, that we started too late. And we will have problems with speeding up to have the same level of knowledge, of know-how as the countries that started a couple of years ago with the hydrogen investments and preparations. So they use product development assistance, they use money for feasibility studies. So we are at the back again, and there are some countries similar to us. So the just transition means for us things that we have to equalize the European Union, not to leave anyone behind. So if you look at, there is a great app, it's called Energy Maps, and you can see the CO2 emissions from energy. And Poland is always a black spot. It's like a thing that it shows which countries are these darker spots on the map. So then these countries will need really, really a lot of support, not not to feel that this country will like to, you know, go separate from the European Commissions, as the anger in the people is caused mainly by the cost of energy now. So it's really important to have it all in mind. What are the processes in integrating the European Union in the matters of energy? That is now one of the most important issues.
Thank you. Maybe just last two, because we are over the time, last two comments from Yanis and then from Roberto. Yeah, please.
I think Roberto was first.
I thought you raised your yeah.
It's okay. It's
That's
okay.
okay.
Go on.
Okay, I can go. Then maybe on what Agnieszka said, I can comment that maybe we should not forget that what comes first is the energy efficiency, and then what is left greening the left energy. So our intention, especially as a cluster, we are definitely pushing a lot towards creating energy communities of the citizens that might go that way first, meaning that first secure the improvement of insulation and everything of the households, and then, or at the same time, of course, but then secure the greener energy and the transition. And I think that's very important, and that's definitely up to the local citizens. Of course, I mean, the usual models might kick in again, like ESCOs, or you might want to discuss with EIB, but if you're a single household owner, you have no chance. But if you have a big energy community of citizens, then it might work. So I think there's still a lot of grounds there to explore towards involving the citizens in that specific direction. Perhaps Agnieszka is a bit more right about the big energy investments. That's not something we can do even if we have an energy community of citizens. I don't think it would be feasible to invest in a very big energy plant, but we could definitely invest in our own houses improvement of energy efficiency.
Thanks, Roberto.
Yeah, so just one last comment on the, again, like I'm getting back on the cheapness argument, which I think it's partly true, but it's not everything that matters. And let me insist on this point. There are other motivations behind people wanting to form energy communities, and the reason also, so one question Agnieszka was asking is, why should we take it in our hands as opposed to just let the investors do? Because they have money, they have the means, they have technical knowledge. So why should we actually start reinventing the wheel? And I think that reinventing the wheel in this case is useful because you're inventing a different kind of wheel. You're inventing probably a smaller wheel. You're inventing a wheel that is not moved by the same interest. I mean, both the definition of energy, renewable energy communities and citizens energy communities is to be a non-profit communities. Then obviously, as Arthur said, we can have also non-profit communities, but that's a different kind of structure. And I think that's the main difference. I mean, the energy communities that are being formed in many places in Europe are explicitly aimed, but not to be profit communities. So they to source energy and to redistribute, so that actually there are even some of these energy communities that don't even aim to resell the surplus electricity to the grid, but they try to make it so that all the energy that is generated by the plant is used by the community, so there is no surplus of it to be sold to the grid. It's one possibility. So and they are not doing for profit; they are doing for other reasons. And I think that's the main difference. So the investor, whether it is renewable or fossil fuel aimed, will come and hope to make a profit of it because that's how companies are made. The energy communities does not necessarily have this aim, and I think so. I think that kind of generates a number of other considerations on what energy and how energy should be used for, and on the limits of the energy that we should be using. So as opposed to thinking that we have an investor that is providing us with a megawatt large plant, and then we can all source as much energy as we could. There is also another consideration about the limits of the energy we should use, the limits that our plant is structured to produce. And I think that is reflecting on our limits and reflecting on the limits on the energy production is a new way to approach the energy world as opposed to the usual one.
Thank you, Roberto. I'm sorry we are a bit over the time, but I think we heard some interesting issues regarding energy community, especially in JTF regions. So for the end, I would like to thank all the participants and the panelists for the interesting presentation, and thank you all and have a nice day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.